Hi, everyone. This is Robin, and this is the last week this week for week 4. So, last week we focused on clarity and influencing, two of the most important skills that you have as a consultant and as a leader and as an employee, but especially as a consultant. So, you watched videos, you read one of my favorite articles, and then I also had you read a couple of chapters out of your book on resistance. Now, we are talking about resistance this week, not last week, but I wanted you to get the reading done last week because this week is kind of busy. So, in addition to that, you did a skills practice. So, you either did your skill practice on creating clarity or you did your skills practice on influence. Whichever one of those you decided to use as your skill practice reflection post, that was due on Sunday. And then, in addition to that, grad students, you continued working on your grad paper. And I did send out an announcement to clarify a little bit about the sources that you can use for that grad paper. Now, I do just want to remind you that the consulting triangle, we've talked about this each week, has technical skills, it has consulting process skills, and then it has consulting skills or consulting competencies. And the reason we have the arrows on two of those is because we are not going to be talking about the technical skills that you're bringing to consulting. We are talking about the consulting skills that you're bringing to the process. So I want to step back for a minute and talk about the consulting process. So here's the consulting process as it is described in your textbook. So it starts with entry and contracting, moves to discovery and dialogue, analysis and decision to act, engagement and implementation, and finally extension, recycle, or termination. Now, when we think about the technical skills that you're bringing, these two phases of the consulting process, or maybe even these three phases of the consulting process, are going to overlap potentially with your technical skill. So, if your technical skill is HRD, there might be specific HRD models or HRD processes that you use that will overlap with two or three of these phases. So, for example, if you're a grad student, you may have taken OLP 6661, Human Performance Technology. And Human Performance Technology, that model, the steps of that model, we overlay on discovery and dialogue, analysis and decision to act, and engagement and implementation. The Human Performance Technology model also includes information on discovery and dialogue, analysis and decision to act, and engagement and implementation. So you're going to be using, if you're using the human performance technology model, you're going to use it in conjunction with the consulting process. So you'll have both of those models and they'll be overlapping in those three middle steps. The same is true if you have an instructional design model. So those of you who've taken the grad class 6663 in instructional design or the undergraduate class 4402 in instructional design, you will find that the steps of that model overlaps with some of the consulting process. So again, whether it's instructional design, change management, evaluation, organizational development, any of these models that we have that belong to our specific technical skill, specific discipline, overlap. And so we use them hand in hand with the technical model and the consulting process. And of course, you may find yourself in a consulting process where you don't have a model from your technical skill, and then you're relying solely on the consulting process model. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about how those things fit together. All right, let's talk about this week. So this week we are talking about the second phase in the consulting process, discovery and dialogue, and we're talking more about influence. So you are going to begin by reading chapters 10 through 13, which are on discovery and dialogue. And then I also have optional for you to read chapter 11. Chapter 11 is really about whole system discovery, and that's something that may not be as relevant to most of you. So most of you, when you do a consulting process, it's going to be just you or maybe a consulting team, and you are going to go into the organization and do your consulting process. With whole system discovery, the whole organization gets together in one room, and then you engage with them around discovery and dialogue as a whole group. So, and again, when I say the whole organization, I don't mean the whole organization, but the part of the organization that you're consulting with. So, most of the time, I think what you're going to be doing is going into the organization and talking to one or two or three or five people, and you might have some focus groups, you might have some interviews, but it's less likely that you're going to bring the whole group together in the room and do a whole system discovery. It's a very powerful thing to do, but I just think it's probably less common for the kinds of work you might be doing. But I wanted to give you a chance to get exposed to it, so I'm making it optional. In addition, I've included a few resources on the tools that I use most often when I do whole system discovery. So when I do whole system discovery, I tend to use something that's referred to as OpenSpace, and I gave you some resources on that. Or I tend to use something called World Cafe, and I gave you some resources on that. I also gave you some resources on Future Search. That's not a whole system discovery that I use very often. I've used it a few times, but I have some colleagues that use it quite a bit. In particular, they use it in K to 12, K to 16 environments. So I wanted to include a few resources for you on that as well. But those are optional. So chapters 10 to 13 required, chapter 11 and the resources on OpenSpace, World Cafe, and Future Search optional. All right, let's talk about the assignments. So your first assignment is going to be a consulting process assignment. It's the discovery case study number 1. Now, again, if we go back to our consulting triangle, last week you only had to post on your consulting skills. You had a clarity or an influence that you posted about on Sunday. Most weeks, including this week, we're going to have an assignment on the consulting skills and an assignment on the consulting process. This is the same thing we did in week 2. So coming back to the assignments, you're going to have a consulting process assignment that you are going to be discussing with your group in the forum, and it's going to be discovery case study number 1. And again, the purpose of these case studies are for you to take what you've learned in the book and analyze the case study using that information that you learned in the book. So please tie it to what you've learned in the book. And then the second thing you're going to do is your weekly skills practice, and that's going to be on influence strategies. So I've included a video that talks again about the influence continuum, talks a little bit about resistance, and then talks about 11 specific influence strategies, half of which are appropriate if you're trying to get compliance, and half of which are appropriate if you're trying to get commitment. And so in the video, I go over those 11 influence strategies. I also have a handout for you of the 11 influence strategies that I talk about in the video with their definitions. And then your assignment for your weekly skill practice is going to be to use the influence strategies. So you will think about a situation where you need to influence. You will plan out ahead of time what are the influence strategies that you're going to use. And I say influence strategies because it's very likely you're going to use more than one influence strategy. And then on Sunday, by Sunday, you're going to write your reflection on how that skill practice went. And then grad students, of course, you continue working on your grad paper, which is due week 5 next week. So that is it. That's what we're doing this week. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing what you come up with for your case study and your practice, and I'll see you online.